Hello, welcome to the phoneword.org Registrar Workshop. Today is Wednesday, May the 14th, 2014. It's it is 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and this is the second Wednesday workshop for the month of May. We will be having a third Wednesday workshop on May the 21st, 2014, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for folks that can make an earlier time. And during that workshop next week, a week from today, we will be covering some of the points that we're going to be covering today. So today we're going to be talking about browser-based dialing using the Phono platform of Voxeo, and we'll be doing a little demonstration of that. We'll also be talking about some general architectural considerations for the proposed overall platform for phoneword.org in terms of how the registry is structured, how the registrar layer is proposed, and how some of the policies might be put into place that are part of the innovation initiative surrounding phoneword.org. So, thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started, and there might be a few folks joining. This is being posted on www.phoneword.org, and it's recorded, and you can replay after today's workshop. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a screen share and go into the presentation. So here's today's workshop. Okay. If you can follow along, this presentation is posted on www.phoneword.org. So essentially, here is our agenda for today. Again, we're going to be talking about dialable rich media, and we're going to be doing a demonstration of that on www.phoneword.us, which is a demo site where we'll be developing and adding some features and functionalities to what is developed surrounding rich media, dialable rich media, excuse me. And we are using the Phono platform, which is offered by Voxeo Labs, I believe it is. And Phono is a very powerful web-based tool where you can actually place a dialer directly into a website and create a phone out of any browser, basically. Although, well, let me take that back. Primarily, it's best used on Chrome or Firefox. So we do recommend that if you go to www.phoneword.us and you want to try out the dialer, use Chrome or Firefox. We're going to be talking about some unified provisioning and administration alternatives. We're also going to be talking about and looking at some use cases surrounding the initiative that could be valuable and important to commercial community participants as well as academic and research community participants. Then we'll be talking about next steps and concluding from there. So let's go to the next slide and just review what are the goals of the phoneword.org initiative. First and foremost, we are interested in setting up something that is very easy to use. As easy to use as dialing a telephone, which arguably just about everybody in the world can do. However, in conjunction with that ease of use, we're also looking to add a new level of security that is complementary to the ease of use. So to this point, there's generally been a trade-off. Either something's very easy to use and unsecure or mostly unsecure, or it's secure to use but it's difficult to connect to. And we think there's an opportunity with the proposal at hand in terms of a new generation of naming, addressing, and numbering that can combine the best of both worlds in terms of ease and security. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some new elements of security as we get into today's workshop and presentation. Some of the maximum user value that's available out of this is a peer-to-peer configuration using WebRTC. And by the way, phono.com is WebRTC enabled, and that opens up a whole new world of connectivity that we think is very, very exciting. So in addition, there's a new realm of identity management where we're looking to innovate surrounding identity management. There's also an opportunity to create a new relationship between a user's set of addresses. So all of us have a whole bunch of email addresses, different phone numbers, different names in terms of when we're using Twitter, when we're using Facebook, when we're using Skype, when we're using LinkedIn, all these different names, addresses, and numbering elements. We think there's an opportunity to create something new, a new relationship between and among our whole basket of identifiers. So that is one of the intentions of what we're looking to innovate around and experiment with. And the fourth element that I think is important is that we are designing this so that if what's being developed in terms of the functionality in the internet world does not work, we can always fall back on the existing copper telephone network. So we went over this in the last workshop. I'm not going to talk much about it. However, under this approach, there's something new available where I believe we can create where we can create new services, new functionalities using the Internet Protocol network. However, always having the fallback to go to a regular telephone call and be connected no matter what, at least during this transition period where the new services, the new functionalities being created in the Internet Protocol world, there'll be this fallback position until all this new development, new innovation is created, and then the copper telephone network can finally be retired once everyone's comfortable that the new paradigm, the new regime, the new functionality works. So that's a few of the end-user value propositions surrounding what's proposed in the phoneword.org approach. So, next slide, which is the fourth slide, we're looking at a snapshot of the browser dialing example. And this you can see at www.phoneword.us. And this is just a very, very simple example of what can be done. And this is actually a working dial. However, it's only terminating to 1-800 phone word at this point. But let me go ahead and show how this works. So I'm going to turn off this screen share, and I'm going to open up a new screen share. And here you can see phoneword.us. Now, I haven't tried this before, so we'll see if it actually works. At least through a Google Hangout, it looks like it's going to work just fine. But basically, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but I'm hovering over the 1-800 phone word that's at the top of the dialer, and as I press that, it says calling. Now look at the top of the browser, and you'll see that there has to be permission granted to use the microphone, and I press allow. You can hear it ringing.
Hold please while we connect your call.
And sure enough, okay, you can see that my phone is ringing.
Forwarded to an automatic voice message system. 022.
It's going to voicemail.
Is not available. At the tone, please record your message. When you have finished recording, you may hang up or press 1 for more options.
All right, we're making a test call, and I'm going to actually press 1 to hang up, or pound.
If you are satisfied with your message, press 1 to listen to your message. Press 2 to erase and re-record. Press 3 to continue message review.
All right, we're making a test call, and I'm going to actually press 1 to hang up.
If you are satisfied with your message, press 1 to listen to your message. Press 2. Thank you. Your message has been sent. Goodbye.
Okay, so that disconnected the call. So what that demonstrates is excuse me a second while I get back into the Hangout. So what that just demonstrated was the ability to turn a web browser into a telephone. Now, in addition to making telephone calls, you can also do video calls. So this is very, very powerful. This was not a click-to-call. This is much more than click-to-call. It's fully programmable, and as we move forward with the testbed initiative, as we move forward with developing the phoneword.org platform, tying the browser-based dialer to do a lookup, an enum lookup, and return different elements like websites, YouTube videos, telephone numbers, email addresses, etc. That is one of the most powerful elements of what I think we can play with and innovate. And as I showed in the last workshop, this same functionality can be incorporated into an Android device. So there is a software application to add to the native Android dialer so that when someone enters a telephone number that has been registered and certain things have been associated with that telephone number, like YouTube videos, like websites, then that lookup can be performed on a handheld mobile device, smartphone, tablet, etc. And various rich media elements can be returned. And this is very, very powerful. And doing this in a browser makes it even more ubiquitous, more powerful, because now we're talking about pure IP, browser-based, no download needed, point-to-point, peer-to-peer connectivity. And that, in my view, is very powerful and arguably quite disruptive and revolutionary. So let's go back to the presentation. And okay, so here we are where we left off in the presentation. This is the development site again, phoneword.us, with the browser dialer, and more features and functionality will be added to this as we move forward. So the next slide, which is slide 5, talk a little bit about what exists today. What is out there? Well, for the most part, we're looking at a lot of silos when it comes to the time division multiplexed world, the TDM world, which is being retired, or that's the intention. We're looking at a lot of silos. We're also, to some degree, looking at silos when we're talking about existing social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those work great, but effectively you're pretty much within their walled garden or their silo as you use those various services. The other thing that's prevalent today is there's a lot of pieces in the middle. There are things like session border controllers, there's session initiation protocol, which adds a significant degree of complexity for the most part. SIP is the backbone, no doubt, of today's IP communications, especially when we're talking about voice. However, there's, I would say, a decent amount of overhead associated with using SIP. Another thing that we're looking at that's a huge factor is identity is clouded today in the existing TDM world, especially when you add things like SIP into the mix, and all of a sudden the need for identity and identity management is becoming an immensely growing issue. So the other part that I think is important to look at and talk about in the existing telephone number realm is that for the most part we're dealing with numbers, and people over the last 10, 15 years have become very much accustomed to dealing with phrases. So often when I talk about telephone numbers, people say, well, I don't really care about my telephone number. In fact, I don't even know what my telephone number is. I dial using contacts in my smartphone or use email addresses or whatever. So this is being highlighted because I think there's an opportunity to innovate around creating something that's the best of both worlds, both a number as well as a phrase that's easy to remember. And each version of the addressing, numbers and phrases, have their strong points and their advantages. Another part that, in my view, I think we can innovate around is that today there's no market pricing signals for real-time feedback for the most part in the TDM, PSTN, public switch telephone network, copper network, and so forth. And in many respects there aren't pricing signals that are available in other realms of our communication as well. The primary method of allocation today is first come, first serve, not only in terms of addresses, but also in terms of connection to the internet, and that in itself can be and is becoming more problematic as we move forward. There's limited choice for subscribers for choosing addressing when it comes to numbering, and also limited choices when it comes to transmission priority. Also, there is no central registry. There is no whois when it comes to the telephone network. Yes, there is caller ID. However, that caller ID, A, can be spoofed and is spoofed, and the spoofing is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. But B, the caller ID, for the most part, is based upon whoever's name is on the bill, and that is problematic as well. So that's what we're dealing with today. So what's the possibilities? Well, the possibilities are that we could set up with this numbering testbed initiative, with a new approach to naming, addressing, and numbering, we could have multiple registries that work together via a policy set. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes, but I think that's a very, very exciting proposition that adds a new level of choice for end users, subscribers, the public, the consumer. The other thing is that I think we can structure something that is purely peer-to-peer, and that is very revolutionary as well. Won't talk about that much at this point. The third point is the first two propositions, the multiple registries and the peer-to-peer, are based upon a notion of creating null registrations for all possible telephone number-like addresses within each registry. And there is a link to a paper that I wrote some years ago that talks about how this could be set up, how it could be implemented, and that is a key element of what's being proposed with the phoneword.org approach. So the fourth point is identity as part of the registration. What are we talking about there? Well, we're talking about weaving in identity into the registration process and creating something that is like a whois that has not existed but could exist. And we'll talk about how that could be accomplished a little bit later as well. The fifth item is phrases with telephone number-like addresses. And again, this gets back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago, which is each telephone number can spell an infinite amount of phrases. Now, generally, whoever is the rightful subscriber to a given telephone number can choose which phrase they would like to associate it with their telephone number-like address. And that opens up a world of opportunities and possibilities, which again ushers in a best of both worlds situation where addresses can be number-like when it's advantageous to be number-like, or they can be phrase-like when it's advantageous to be phrase-like. So the next three items are very important, and they are market elements for possible architectures. And again, these are just simply proposals. These are not cast in stone. This is just what's being put forth as a realm of innovation that could be associated with this initiative to test, to build, to test, to iterate. So the next three items, market-based allocation of addresses, both in primary and secondary markets, toll-free broadband markets for optimal connectivity, and then prediction markets for security. Those are the three primary market elements that PhoneWord.org is proposing to fold in as part of the innovation, part of the experimentation process that is getting underway here in the United States or in North America, and for that matter, worldwide. So I won't go into those three market elements and segments, but those will be topics for future workshops for sure. The last point on this page is PhoneWord.org is proposing an over-the-top approach. So this is designed so it can be created on top of what exists today without disrupting what exists today, and the development, the innovation can take place, and then people have a graceful way to move from the legacy into the contemporary. So we'll go to the next slide, which is slide 7, and this continues the possible architectural elements, which one of the key things that's been a stopping point for ushering in end-user opt-in enum, which has been around for some time, and basically up until this point pretty much considered dead. But one of the key elements that has stopped end-user opt-in enum is sorting out, okay, who's the rightful subscriber or, quote, owner of this telephone number, even though telephone numbers cannot be owned by anyone, and with the exception of Australia, telephone numbers cannot be traded in the open market. But part of the PhoneWord.org's architecture is designed to have a series of dispute resolution methods available so that disputes, when they arise, can be settled quickly and efficiently. And the first one is Coasian resolution. And this is a reference to Ronald Coase, who created a paradigm for resolving disputes when certain what's called externalities are involved, or disputes around, okay, who's going to do what, who's going to pay for what, and so forth. There's a reference here to Wikipedia. You can review the Coase theorem, and Coase's work was actually done back in the late 50s and paved the way for the current spectrum auctions that are happening all over the world, particularly here in the United States. And I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with Ronald Coase and his work, take a look at his the economic paradigm that he set forth and how it works, because I think it opens up some very interesting opportunities to finally usher in a new realm of naming, addressing, and numbering. The second is a process using random draws to settle disputes. I won't go into that today. The third, arbitration, and the fourth is judicial. And we'll just leave those as is for now. But those four dispute resolution processes, in that order, are a key cornerstone to what's being put forth with phoneword.org. Now, the last item is virtual numbers as a starting point. And what this means is that the proposal for phoneword.org going forward is to use virtual numbers. What's a virtual number? Virtual number is something that looks like a telephone number, but it doesn't have a working telephone number-like counterpart that's operating on the public switch telephone network. And this affords an opportunity to create and innovate using numbering that will not have inherent conflicts like a traditional telephone number would if it had a fully qualified domain name that was operating as a counterpart to that underlying telephone number that actually works. And by the way, we are talking about, with the phoneword.org, we're talking about fully qualified domain names. So when 11 digits are entered into that browser dialer, even though it might look and feel like a telephone number, actually the 11 digits when they're entered are being converted into, the first thing that's happening is they'll be converted into a fully qualified domain name, and a lookup will occur to see if that domain name exists, what's associated with it, and so forth. Only if the lookup is unsuccessful will those 11 digits be turned into a traditional telephone number or telephone call. And that's an important distinction to keep in mind as we move forward. Excuse me. So slide 8. This is a diagram of the registry, and we went over this in great detail in the prior workshop, so I won't say much about it other than this is just a diagram of what phoneword.org is proposing as the best way to move forward with the registry structure, which is multiple registries working together. And particularly when we're talking about innovation, I think this really, the multiple registry approach affords a way to have different people take different approaches with different registries, test, innovate, iterate, see what works, what doesn't work, versus spending a whole bunch of time and effort trying to pick the perfect registry to use as the numbering test bed. And in addition, a key element to each registry is that each registry we're proposing has either an active or a null record for every possible telephone number-like address. So we'll leave it at that for the registry. This is the service layers of the phoneword.org platform. First of all, the top is the registry, an enum registry basically, with certain elements of identity management. Then a layer of registrars, which we'll talk about the different types of registrars a little bit later. And we did talk about registrars and the different types of registrars to a large extent at both the PhoneWord Forum, which was on the 30th, I believe, of April, as well as the prior phoneword.org Registrar Workshop. And then the last layer is registrant services or end user subscriber services. So I won't talk about that much. Next slide, slide 10. The 3 types of registrars and participants proposed for phoneword.org are commercial registrars, sponsored registrars, and general participants. We've talked about those extensively in the past on the other workshops, so we'll go right to slide 11. What types of commercial entities might be interested in becoming registrars? Certainly carriers, social media platforms, internet domain registrars, vendors, and large enterprises. And there could be others as well. The next slide is slide 12, and what sort of use cases are we talking about to experiment with? We can have dialable voice and audio sessions, and when I'm saying voice, that can be high definition voice and audio. We can have dialable video, so instead of wrestling with getting into something like a webinar situation that involves all sorts of plugins and maybe downloads and complexities, the idea is to create something that's dialable to access video. Also, video can be delivered that is time and context sensitive, that opens up a realm of use cases that's very much akin to QR codes or quick response codes. Also, dialable webinar and collaboration, making it as easy and simple as possible. And again, we think there's some opportunities for a new level of security as well. But what if it were as simple as dialing a phone number-like address? Then incorporating social media platforms. So what would it look like to be able to, for us as end users, us as consumers, as the public, the end user on the edge, what would it look like if we could have choice and control and be empowered over our social media platforms and choices that we present to our public that's trying to connect with us? Then other use cases for commercial registrars would be to create a whole new set of business models where traditional services could gracefully migrate to, and by traditional services I'm talking about time and distance business models, could be gracefully moved into a new set of business models and services, which might involve things like hosting, privacy, security. And that's, I think, a very interesting opportunity for some of the commercial companies that are out there now that might be looking at becoming a registrar in this situation. Identity management, we've talked a little bit about that. I think that's certainly a huge opportunity. Financial transactions goes hand in hand with identity management, and there's others. So this is certainly not an exhaustive list. So let's go on to the sponsored registrars. What are we talking about there? Well, we're talking about academic registrars, research, public safety, perhaps religious institutions, military, government entities, general participants, who knows? But the idea is to have a level of participation available in the realm of being a registrar, which is having a certain group of addresses that are pretty much managed and administered by a registrar, having those available to these, we'll call them not-for-profit types of entities. So what sort of use cases could we look at there? Well, again, we'd be looking at use cases where there's dialable voice, easy to get into, audio sessions, high definition, classroom connections that can be as simple as possible to connect with, and dialable video for educational interactions, dialable webinars and collaboration for classroom and lesson connections. Again, social media, connectivity, interactions, um, new innovation that could more tightly integrate social media platforms into the educational realm. Also, again, identity management, which comes up in a number of ways for the sponsored registrar set of participants. So let's go on to slide 15. The general participants, well, in this realm, we're talking about a governance community. So phoneword.org will require some sort of governance and something that is what I like to call Swiss neutral. So it's nonpartisan, and nonpartisan as much as can possibly be imagined. That's an area where I think we have an opportunity to innovate. Also, for this to move forward, there must be a developer community that's fostered, built, and encouraged to participate in this. Also, focus groups, getting real-time feedback from people that either are or would be potential users of this new platform, this new dialable rich media platform and service set. The general participants can also include competitors. So companies that are competitors, could be competitors, or were competitors and now have an opportunity to work in a collaborative fashion, at least during this period where we're building, testing, and innovating and iterating. So then there's other general participants and who knows what else. So those are the various sectors that we're looking to foster. All right, slide 16, collaboration. We've talked about this a lot in the past on the other workshops. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I do think we have a new opportunity to foster collaboration, both in terms of the development process, in terms of the governance, in terms of how can this move forward with a new realm of cooperative opportunity, either, well, certainly face-to-face, but also virtually like this, where we've got a whole new tool set like this Google Hangout, where all of a sudden people from all over the world can work together and in a cooperative fashion can actually work on the technical side of things, actually sharing screens, coding together, working together. So, and by the way, one of the key pieces of the foundation for phoneword.org is that this is developed on an open source basis, so that whatever code is created is shared. And we'll go to slide 17. So the question is, what do you want? What, as the community, would be most valuable to you? And how can that be created to address the needs that you currently have? And the needs could be technical, although I really suspect that the biggest realm of opportunity is to innovate in the policy area, in the governance area, and in the business model area. And there's been quite a bit of talk around the numbering workshop that occurred on March 25th, 2014 at the Federal Communications Commission, and the conversation was, hey, let's just keep this on a technical level, technical basis, but throughout the day in that workshop, the policy questions and considerations and governance and business model considerations kept coming up over and over. And my question is it realistic to think that anything of value can be created anything usable can be created trying to sterilize this test bed initiative on a purely technical level. And I assert, and I've been involved in this conversation for over a decade now, I assert that all three elements have to work together. So the technical, the policy, and the business model, all three of those elements must be part of the mix of testing, innovation, sandboxing, call it what you will, but it's like a three-legged stool here, folks. It doesn't work unless you've got three legs on the stool. And anything short of that, two legs doesn't work, one leg doesn't work, and what you end up at the end of the day is a stool with no legs, where you're sitting on the floor and you've got nothing. So we'll see how things progress with this initiative, the numbering testbed, and phoneword.org, but this is really an opportunity for the community to determine, state, express what they want, and then play with it to see what works, what doesn't work in real life, but yet still in somewhat of a controlled fashion. So the next slide, slide 18, next steps. Well, we have a phoneword.org workshop on May 21st, 2014 at 11 a.m. Eastern. By that time, with any luck at all, we'll have more functionality associated with phoneword.us so that we can experiment with some more powerful browser-based, web-based dialing and connectivity. We're also, it's probably going to be a little bit optimistic to think that we'll have a lot of progress on the registry operation by that point, or the registrar API, but certainly those are the goals. Now, in addition, we are working on and proposing a set of technical and governance and organizational innovation that goes hand in hand with this initiative to create, build, evaluate, and iterate, and hopefully do something that's brand new. So, slide 19. Here's the contact information. My name again is Jay Carpenter, and please feel free to reach out if you'd like to be added to the mailing list, which is being put together, the distribution list. Just send an email to jcarpenter@phoneword.org. You can follow us on Twitter at phoneword.org, and we are updating the Twitter items, and we will be having these workshops twice a month. And the last slide, slide 20, thank you. Thank you for participating. We invite you to join us. You can go to phoneword.org and be sure to put in the www.phoneword.org and look at the registrar page. There will be 25 registrars for the commercial community and 25 for the sponsored community, and there's a way that you can participate in that. So thank you for watching today and participating. I invite you to tune in next week, Wednesday the 21st at 11 a.m. Eastern, and we will have additional developments, and we are working on the distribution list, and I will be reaching out to some people individually to invite them to participate in the upcoming workshops. So it's very late in Europe, and next week will be more conducive to our folks in Europe participating. So thank you, and we're almost at the top of the hour. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and please feel free to give me a call or contact me. You can actually go to phoneword.us, click the phone word 1-800 phone word bar, press allow, and that will create a telephone call through your browser directly to me, Jay Carpenter. So thank you for participating, and we look forward to your participation in the future.